Hello everyone, another edition of the Ottawa market. Today we're going to be talking about an issue of public importance, a serious issue of public importance, and that has to do with the experience of ethics that people have when they go to Canada's big banks. Now I'm happy to report that from my basic observation that banks in general are quite ethical and responsible. Our Canadian banks, we've had a very good reputation for our banks in Canada, except for one particular bank, which we want to talk about, the RBC, and this particular branch in particular, 99 Bank Street. And let's give some indication to everybody what's going on with the RBC. Now, in a particular important case, we all know about the experience of Thomas Nassab and his experience of having been a client for over 30 years, or about 30 years. Well, in this particular another incident, someone else with a client with RBC for over 30 years, roughly 30 years, basically had all of a sudden, last couple of years, experiences of discrimination, serious discrimination at this particular branch, and one at the Glebe branch in Ottawa, and at the 90 Spark Street branch, I believe, and yes, that's at Spark Street, 90 Spark Street. Now, this involves all sorts of transactions and activities that all of a sudden the RBC in the last couple of years decided to perpetrate. This was presented to the Canadian Human Rights Commission, which regarded the aberrations and the activities involving the bank that were reported to them serious enough to merit an investigation. And after the investigation, it was concluded that there was serious enough information to merit the Canadian Human Rights Commission then recommending that the matter be put forward to the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, which is looks over various, basically the Human Rights Tribunal looks after issues of human rights, discrimination, reports regarding discrimination that have to do with federally regulated institutions in Canada. Particularly that includes the federal government as well as chartered banks in Canada. So in this particular matter, not only did this individual experience the discrimination reported originally that was approved for review by the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal as per the referral by the Canadian Human Rights Commission. Not only was that, but this individual also experienced repeated bold-faced retaliations by RBC, quite shocking retaliations. Now, the normal response for an institution that's been charged with discrimination is to be contrite, to then keep a low profile, and to avoid further repercussions or substantive, interactions which merit discrimination. But not in the case of RBC. Its particular, basically, there was two serious retaliations. And one of these retaliations were recorded on a, recorded appropriately. Well, without getting into too much details of that, but basically the individual, called RBC client services immediately after the discriminatory incident. The RBC manager, the relatively new manager at this particular branch, posted an inappropriate message on the on their, that basically was distributed across the different branches. So the individual called RBC customer service and basically asked them a couple of times, is this inappropriate? Is this inconsistent with RBC bank policy? The RBC representative in a couple of times said emphatically that this action by this RBC, relatively new branch manager, was inconsistent with the policies of the bank. So that was quite interesting. So anyway, RBC decided to then produce an alleged audio file of this interaction between the individual who had experienced the discrimination and the RBC representative. But quite interestingly enough, the audio file did not contain the incriminating parts of the conversation that, the RBC representative indicated that, that basically the posting of this message by the RBC branch manager, which was posted across institutions, and RBC, advising RBC institutions how to deal with this particular individual who had experienced discrimination, which basically was a discriminatory message. This part of the conversation, which was quite incriminating to RBC, was not a part of the audio file that has been produced for prospective review by the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. Well, that's pretty shocking. So what happened to this conversation? What's going on with this audio file? Well, this particular individual then decided to have this audio file reviewed for forensic analysis to find out what happened to that part of the conversation. Now, according to the forensic expert, this forensic analysis done, according to that forensic review, the missing file, this audio file, was subject to post-production manipulation. Basically, the file is not a raw file as RBC is alleged to have produced to the Canadian for prospective review by the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. That the file was basically doctored, altered in ways to be favorable to RBC, not including that conversation, but being presented to the tribunal for prospective review that it was a raw file. So this is a particularly serious matter. Now, how can we have a venerated bank like RBC producing evidence which is inconsistent with the actual original experience of that actually what went on? So this is quite a serious matter. So the forensic review produced that this RBC basically, apparently manipulated this particular evidence to favor them and omitted parts of the conversation which they did not want revealed by the Human Rights Tribunal. So that was the result of the forensic review. This forensic review was then presented to the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal with the name of the individual who the forensic analysis. RBC then produced to the tribunal, evidence that they in fact had available, got the contact information of this forensic analysis. They produced his Upwork, his Upwork profile and a profile of him on LinkedIn. So we know that RBC had access and had available contact information, which gave them an opportunity to then contact this representative based upon the contact information which they produce as them having accessed. And guess what? After they produce this contact information, the forensic analysis then blocked the individual, not wanting to have further contact with the individual, and there's all sorts of interesting things that went on subsequent to that. So now we have a situation where right after RBC produced this contact information, the RBC, the forensic expert, which had basically, produced information critical to